Hi everyone, this is Michelle. I have another technique to show you today using your DIY stencils. Today I'm going to be showing you how to create a modeling paste and embossing powder background. So first thing I'm going to do is pull out a sheet of very thick white cardstock. This is 110 pounds. And it's cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to fit a standard size card front. And I'm just putting down a stencil that I cut using my Cameo, and I actually went to the Silhouette store and I searched for backgrounds, and this one just has a bunch of daisies on it, and I'm taping the stencil down with some washi tape to keep it in place. And once that's done, I'm going to take out some modeling paste from Liquitex. This is very similar to embossing paste, and I'll actually link you to embossing paste because that's what's more commonly used, but this is what I had on hand, so this is what I'm using for this video. So I'm just taking a palette knife and scraping some out of the jar and then applying it to my cardstock through the stencil, and I'm just using the palette knife to really smooth it out and get a nice thin layer. And you'll see I'm actually concentrating only on the edges and kind of leaving the center blank because the only part that's going to be showing of my card is the edges, so I just don't really have to worry about the center part. So I'm going to smooth it all out and wipe off any of the excess with a baby wipe off of my palette knife so it doesn't dry there. And I'll take off my stencil very carefully, trying not to touch any of the places with the paste. And while the paste is still wet, I'm taking out some clear sparkle embossing powder from Wow. And I'm just going to apply this all over where the paste is around the edges. And once that's all on there, I took out a piece of scrap paper, and I'm just going to put this on top of my piece and very lightly press down just to make sure that the powder goes, sticks to the paste a little bit better. And then I'm going to take off all of the excess powder really carefully, trying not to touch any of the areas on the card, and just put all of the excess back into my jar of embossing powder. So once all the extra powder is put away, I'm going to go ahead and wash off my stencil very well. Usually I just wipe off my stencils with a baby wipe, but since this paste is a little thicker than just using ink, I'm going to go ahead and wash this in my sink with some warm water. And I set that aside a piece to dry, but meanwhile I'm going to work on the front panel. So I pulled out this stamp set by W+9. And I'm taking a piece of white cardstock and cutting it down to half of the size of a standard size card front. And this will just be the perfect size to put on the front of our card so that our background will still show around the edges. So this is cut to 4 1/4 by 2 3/4. And to give it a little more definition around the edges, I'm going to mat it with some dark gray cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere this white piece onto the gray cardstock. And then after it's taped on, I'm going to go ahead and trim around the edges, leaving a very thin border around. And once that's done, I took one of the sentiments from the stamp set that says "On Your Special Day," and I'm going to stamp that in some Hero Arts gray ink. And next we have to work on the bouquet of flowers. That's going to be the centerpiece for this front panel. So you'll see I'm pulling out some stamped and die cut pieces that I've already done in the past. I like to just do a whole bunch of these at once so that I can just pick the pieces that I want for my bouquet, and I don't have to go back and stamp more if I ran out of any pieces. I can just pick from this collection, and I'm just going to show you really quickly how to do some basic stamping with building stamp sets like this one. So I'm going to take out all of my leaf die cuts, and I'm going to stamp them in a light green ink. This one is also a shadow ink by Hero Arts. The shadow inks are really good for this type of stamp because they build nicely on top of each other and create these nice layers of color. So the first green color I used was lime green, And once I have these leaves stamped down, there are a couple of the images that come with stems that you're supposed to stamp on top of that. So I just pulled those out, and I'm going to be stamping these in a darker green color, which is field greens. And you'll see I have my color guide on the side just to show me which colors would work well together. So you'll see I stamped the lighter color first and then the darker color on top of that with the stems. And this just creates some more depth to these images so that it looks like more than a stamped image. It looks like almost like an illustration or pattern paper, which I think is really cool. Then for the flowers, I did the same thing. Some of these even have 3 layers, so I think it's really cool just to get a nice dimensional look to these paper flowers. And I'll just show you up close here what it looks like. You can see the 2 different colors that creates a nice effect on these flowers. And really quickly, I'm just going to stamp a few other flowers using the same technique. And then once I have all of these images stamped up, you'll see I have a ton of these beautiful little flowers on my desk. And I just love looking at this. I think they're just so beautiful, and this is perfect to build a scene because you can see I have so many flowers to choose from, and if I just need a different color, I can just go ahead and grab that, and it's really easy to put together this beautiful bouquet of flowers for our centerpiece. So once I have that all arranged nicely, I'm going to glue these all down, and this can be a little tricky because there's so many little pieces, but I find it's helpful to maybe use some tweezers to pick up these pieces, as you'll see I'm doing here, and I'm just taking my palette knife to spread some glue over some of these flower pieces, and I'm actually starting from the top layers going down. That way I don't have to disturb any of the bottom layers while I'm gluing, and the glue will actually glue down multiple layers at once. And whatever isn't glued down, I can just lift up the edges and stick some glue under with my palette knife, and this makes it really easy to glue things and not have to move them around too much. So you'll see I'm just going around all the edges doing that, making sure that everything is adhered down. And then once everything is glued, I just like to put my acrylic block or something a little heavy on top of it just to weigh it down to let all of that glue set. And I'm going to put away all my extra flowers and use them for a future card. So now that our front panel is set, we can go back and put on top of the background that I created earlier. You'll see I actually have 2 different backgrounds because I just made 2 at once. One of them's with a chevron stencil and one of them is with the daisy one that I showed you. And I'm using some sandpaper to wipe off along the edges. Sometimes when you use modeling paste, some of the edges stick out a little bit, so you can just sand it down and this will make them smooth and finished. And I'm just comparing how my panel looks on both backgrounds, and I decided I wanted to use the daisy one. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to a white card base. I'm being very liberal with my tape because this is a very thick piece that is still slightly warped from the modeling paste. And after that's taped down, I decided that I wanted to use my liquid glue for the front panel, and this is because sometimes it's hard to use tape on modeling paste, especially with embossing powder and glitter on top, because it just doesn't stick as well as it does on normal paper. So the liquid glue really gets into all of the little nooks and crannies and really adheres better. So you'll see here I'm just zooming in for you and showing some close-up shots of this card. And you'll see that the combination of the modeling paste and glitter embossing powder is really beautiful and is an extra special technique to use rather than just using Versamark because it gives a little bit more texture. And just the bouquet of flowers is so beautiful, especially with this building stamp set. So this card was a little bit more involved and advanced than some of my other cards, but hopefully you were able to follow along and get some inspiration for another way to use your stencils. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have on screen some other videos that I've done in this stencil series showing you all different kinds of techniques. You can also go ahead and check out the full playlist. You can also head over to my blog where you can see a full list of supplies or find me on Pinterest and Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.